be honest, medical school does not slow down after you take step one. You have a moment of bliss for a couple of weeks, maybe a month, but then you enter clinicals, juggling rotations, shelf exams, and then thinking about step two already, or COMLEX 2 if you have to take both. It's a lot. But here's the good news. You don't have to keep reviewing every single step one fact forever. In this video, I'll show you exactly how to save serious amounts of time in Anki by suspending step one only cards and focusing on what you actually need to know for step two in your clinical success. If you're shooting and gunning for a 260 plus, 270 plus step two score, I'll also share some tips on how to tweak these settings to keep your edge. Let's get right into it. Welcome back to another video. This is Montu Med. I guess my credibility is that I've been using Anki for a very long time now, since the MCAT, and I was nominated in my medical school class for the Anking award, and I thought that was really funny, and hopefully that instills some trust in you, as my classmates trusted me with their Anki help. And these tips can also help you with step one and COMLEX 1, so make sure you stick around till then, because I will have personalized tips that help a lot of you guys out. Okay, here's the deal. You passed step one, but you're not done with Anki. But you also don't want to keep hammering in every single fact and enzyme. It seems like it's a little redundant and maybe not necessary for step two. Well, you're correct. Step two and your shelf exams are a lot more about clinical knowledge and management of the patient. And knowing step one facts might not be as relevant. If you follow some of the tips in this video, you can really save hours per week, maybe even hundreds of hours by the end of your rotations. So the big picture is, most of the step one cards are not worth your time anymore if they're not showing up in the step two questions or clinical scenarios. But the question is, how do you identify these cards? And here's how you find them and pause them for now. So if I pull up my Anki, go to my anking deck, go to browse. If I scroll down to the bottom here, under tags, you'll see anking step 1 V12 and anking step 2 V12. So if I click on step 1, you'll see at the top that there is over 31,000 cards that are dedicated for step 1. Whereas under the step 2 tag, there's a lot less. Still quite a bit, but there's less than 26,000. So our question here, and the dilemma, is identifying which cards are tagged with step 2 only and not have the step 1 cards. And to do that, you kind of copy the tags for both step 1 and step 2, and you make a filtered deck. So first I'll show you what would happen if I take the step 1 tag and do minus the step 2 tag, which will show me all the cards that are tagged without the step 1 tag, essentially. So right here, if you were like, I want nothing to do with step 1 anymore, I just want to forget, I have no use for those cards. If you're someone in that boat, Control A and then Control J to suspend that. You'll see that the card is suspended that way, and you get another parentheses around the due column. So there's about 9,000 cards there that you can suspend and not have to look back on. That being said, if you're aiming for a higher step 2 score, if you're trying to be very competitive, you want to first notice that there's different high yield tags on these cards. So if I hit step 1, if I scroll down to other, and then under high yield, you'll see that there's 5 different tags from high yield to low yield. And so for pretty much everyone heading into step 2, I would suggest that they suspend at least the low yield and also consider suspending the lower yield cards for step 1. To do that, you see this tag here. Okay, so this is what you would be entering in to find the low yield cards that are tagged only with step 1 cards. So you see that there's a step 1 tag minus a step 2, and then I have the minus the suspended cards to get rid of those cards because you haven't unlocked those yet, and then I would add the tag here. So you can go in manually and suspend these cards if you are wanting to keep some of the other high yield cards for step 1. And you can also do the same. Just change that to a 4 and lower. And this will do the lower yield cards. I have these tagged already, so I'm not going to hit build. I just don't want to mess up my decks, but this is essentially how you would go about suspending the lower and low yield cards for step 1 only tagged cards. And as promised, if you're in a time crunch for step 1 in COMLEX 1, find the step 1 tagged cards, go to the sub tags under other, high yield, and then come to the first tag here, and these are the cards that you would want to unsuspend. These are the highest yield cards for level 1 and step 1 exams. So if you're on a time crunch, focus on getting through these. If you find that you have more time, considering just going down the list and unlocking them as your time allows. That being said, if you're gunning for a very high step 2 score or level 2 score, consider keeping these unlocked. Something else that people do is keeping pharmacology cards, microbiology cards, immunology, some things that might be relevant that they were weak on step 1, keeping those unsuspended for step 2. Let's say you just came out of step 1 recently and you have not necessarily matured all the cards with the step 1 deck. If you wanted to keep those cards that you matured, what you could add in is for all these tags, go one by one. So I'm on the look, for example, here, and add in this part essentially. This removes all the matured cards. So this is just telling Anki to search for cards that have a due date that's greater than 21 days, which is the definition of a matured card. I will only have 2 here, for example, because I've already done that. And you could do the same for all of these tags and suspend those that way also. So you're not maturing new unnecessary cards. Once again, the cards that I showed, those aren't really step 1 high yield, but also not really important for step 2. So for most students, it makes sense to suspend or bury these cards as well, especially if they're not showing up on your real world or shelf exams. And for example, if you do miss any questions like this, you can always come back and unsuspend them. If you're aiming for a very competitive score on step 2, you would not want to necessarily suspend all of step 1 cards, but keeping high-yield physiology, pathophysiology cards unsuspended, which might help why clinical decisions might be made. In my own research, I've heard of students not suspending pharmacology cards and microbiology cards because they do come up, especially if you're shaky on it. I would still suggest that you trim out the true low-yield cards. Even top scorers don't need to memorize every single enzyme detail. Consider suspending are like rare enzyme deficiencies, biochemical pathways that don't come up clinically, and just any tiny details that come up on step 1 trivia. For example, for the card is asking what kind of codon mutation is associated with cystic fibrosis. That probably is not relevant for step 2. If you know the answer to that, drop them in the comments below. For step 2, what I've found and what I've heard is that less is more. This really helps focus on your core clinical presentations, management, and diagnostic steps, which is what step 2 is really about, and not really wasting your time on the minutia. Key to a 260 plus is not seeing every single fact, it's learning how you take the test in, which is what I found in my own experience with step 1. Some other tips that you can do to alter your workload is by setting the needs and reviews that you want. And another tip is you can make filtered decks for targeted studying. So for example, in a certain rotation and you want to be looking at the cards relevant to that rotation, that might be from step 1. There's ways of doing that, and you can use filtered decks and really consider tagging your cards. If you're not sure about a card, it's like a maybe suspend and you want to decide later, you can just tag it as that instead of worrying about where you might have put it. All the settings, the tags, everything can seem a little overwhelming if you're not really familiar with the interface or not really messed with the settings in the past. Trust me, I've used this for several years now, watched a lot of videos in my own research. Hopefully the tips suggested in this video can help you with that. And remember guys, you're not deleting anything permanently. You can always unsuspend the cards if you need it down the road. And if you think that was a mistake or I forgot those cards, and if they seem relevant in your practice questions, you can always go back and unsuspend them. Hopefully that helps and saves you some time with studying. Good luck on your grind. Hope Anki doesn't freak you out anymore. Stay tuned for the next videos. It's been Montu Med. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Take care.